Through the Gates is produced under the support of the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's our mission. We're engaged in fighting at every level so that wildlife management remains science-based and conservation continues to work for our wildlife. To learn more and join the movement, visit SaveTheHuntColorado.com. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the greatest conservation model in the world. It's a success story that should be shared and celebrated because everybody is a part of it. Well, it's another January edition of Through the Gates to save the hunt, and we are in preparation mode of the Colorado General Assembly starting and the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission that will meet tomorrow and Thursday and have a variety of things to discuss that we're going to have to continually bring to the surface of conversations over the course of the next 30, 60, 90 days or whatever we end up doing for fighting the fight to continue to save the hunt. You know, we've modified and we've adapted our message in a way that we're trying to be mainstream, and we're trying to streamline messaging to where people can comprehend not only what we're doing, but what's necessary to be done on the grand scheme of things. So if somebody's in Colorado or if they're in Utah or if they're in Wyoming, they can apply some of these conversations to maybe their subject matter and some of their people that and organizations that they're having to deal with. So yeah, we should be up and running. It's January, February, and March are such busy months because of show season and the conservation community, and because of the general sessions, legislative sessions, and all of the commission stuff, and all of the formulating of focus groups and working groups and management plans and all the things that take place over the course of the initial part of the year. It's like everybody wants to hit the ground running. One thing that's interesting, though, is because when they hit the ground running, oftentimes their feet are moving too fast and they slip and fall. And making sure that you have a direct impact on what you're trying to accomplish. And the reason I say that is because it's easy to get people confused in a level of dysfunction or a lack of functionality to get them involved and engaged in the process. And the reason I say that is, in Colorado, for example, the draw deadline for license applications will be the first week in April. And people will be worried about where they're going to go and how many points they have and what they've got on the docket and where they should apply or should they do a buddy system? Should they try to do a hybrid deal? There's going to be a change in 2028 for preference points. How do I modify my position with 17 points or 28 points or whatever? And, those are important things to individuals, but they're not important things as far as the general scheme on the landscape to be able to maintain the opportunity to utilize those preference points and to have game animals to be able to turn around and pursue once you draw those coveted tags. There's a lot of over-the-counter areas that people can apply for, buy and apply for other licenses, whether you decide you want to gain preference points or not. There's opportunities for people to engage in good quality hunting opportunities throughout the state of Colorado and throughout all of the other Western states that are easier to acquire. Maybe some are over the counter. Maybe some you go through an outfitter pool. Maybe some are a late season draw or an early season draw. They might be backcountry. There's a lot of those that we can probably say that people don't often take advantage of, and the ones that do often have great success and the opportunity to be able to do so. Now, the commission meeting for January, on January 14th and 15th, has a myriad of agenda items. And building up for where we intend on having to go in March, April, May, June, and through this initial stages of the legislative session, there is a beaver bill that is being discussed, and it will attempt to prohibit all avocational harvest on public land. That will be run through the General Assembly. But in conjunction with that, there's a beaver conservation and management strategy that we've been talking about for a while. It's been going on in this stakeholder group of over 170 stakeholders. It's been going on since June or late May of last year in 2025. And it's actually coming to fruition. So the presentation that'll be done by Brian Sullivan and Boyd Wright and Mark Vieira on the 14th, the Beaver Conservation Management Strategy, is worth paying attention to get educated about where some of these things might go and how they might affect not just beaver harvesters or not just beaver watchers or not just beaver believers. It's almost a slight toward the democratic process, I believe, to have a conservation management plan strategy being formulated with 170 stakeholders talking about this drainage and tributary enhancement with beaver activity and translocations and millions of dollars of money that's being infused into this conversation because they're, again, sarcastically, beavers are going to save the planet. They're going to build dams. They're going to create waterways. They're going to raise the water levels. They're going to be fire suppression experts, and they're going to bring back riparian and wetland areas. And they're not supposed to create any conflict. They're not supposed to create any damage. And we're not supposed to be able to harvest them and manage them in any way, shape, or form. The beaver bill that goes in on top of this strategy is a contradiction of the democratic process. The democratic process that was instilled into this particular subject matter, first of all, I don't think it should have been done like it is because it's a fur-bearing species with a fur-bearing working group going on at the same time, with a fur-bearing petition to ban the sale, trade, or barter of fur-bearing pieces and parts, which under the North American model of wildlife conservation has been deemed a legitimate use, the acquisition of those furs. But, you know, if you think you're confused at this point in time by my trying to explain it, wait until you see how things play out from January through March through May with the commission and this beaver bill that is being introduced by, I believe, Representative Lindsay and maybe also Representative Story. But those are things that they clash. They create confusion to the individual that's interested in science-based wildlife management. Why is the legislature engaging in something that has not been fully completed, vetted, and thoroughly constructed through Colorado Parks and Wildlife and through the 170 stakeholders? The inside working side of what CPW did on this beaver conservation management strategy is time consuming and it's science-based and it's very inclusive with input. But the people that don't want any of that, including the animal extremist organizations that we often reference and have to fight about, are supporting this beaver bill, this prohibition on harvest of beavers on public land for avocational purposes. Let's just get rid of the science and let's turn around and let the legislators handle everything because evidently the people that are behind the scenes that wanted the beaver strategy conversation to go aren't happy with the timeline or the results. So let's go with the legislature between they're actually even completed on the CPW, the science-based wildlife management side. In conjunction with that, you're going to see some other things come up. There's a puppy mill bill on the legislative side that will be introduced, and it has to do with prohibiting the sell, trade, barter, offer to sell, trade, or barter, or auction or raffle puppies or dogs and even cats. Cats breed well enough. I don't think anybody has to auction or raffle the damn things. But the dog side of it, waterfowl dogs, upland bird dogs, livestock protection dogs, pest control dogs, cattle dogs, hunting dogs, hounds in particular, none of those would be allowed to be sold, traded, bartered, or raffled or auctioned by licensed, legitimate breeders and utilized for a specific purpose of expertise and care and animal welfare and husbandry. These type of things, ladies and gentlemen, are probably the most disheartening part of the job that we have to do when we talk about supporting the North American model and responsible wildlife management. And while you wouldn't think that a puppy mill bill would be contradictory to what sporting agricultural practices are, it definitely is when you read the language. Now, we've got working groups and we're trying to work with the legislators to modify or maybe kill and just take these things off of the table. But the fact of the matter is there's certain segments of the population that want these things to happen. And the general sportsman, the general person in this specific bill on the puppy mill, they need to pay attention. The language in these things is far-fetched enough to where the average person would think, oh, that's a good thing to do. Just like on the beaver bill, the average person would think that's a good thing to do. But if it's disregarding transparency and accountability and process and procedure, it's not a good thing to do. I don't want myself or my opposition to be able to just go to a legislator and say, hey, I got this great idea. And while it might be a great idea to somebody, them not knowing that they're attempting to circumvent the system that is in the works, that is also ongoing to try to create these management strategies or these adaptations of management on a variety of levels. I don't think that legislators should engage in anything that is being conducted by a agency of the state that is trying to either correct or enhance a particular component of what their level of expertise is, including the funding side, including the boots on the ground strategy side. And I think that the general public would not prefer that to happen because, for one, it seems like a waste of funds. For two, it seems like a waste of process, waste of people's time. I've had people say, well, if they're going to do this on the legislative side, I'm done. I'm not participating in these focus groups, these working groups, these stakeholder groups any longer. This is a bunch of BS. Similar to what some of us felt during the Wolf Plan that, as I've commented on previously, First Gentleman Marlon Reese said that we are acting in bad faith. We have bad faith actors. No, we have people that are interested in processes that should be allowed to put some value and some backbone into these processes to make sure that once they start, they can actually come to fruition and be completed in totality before some other entity of government or some other organization or individual decides we want to throw a wrench into the spokes and we want to move our agenda forward before these other aspects actually get to be heard, voted on, or compiled for data and information gathering and distribution. So that's one thing that on the 14th at the commission meeting, the Beaver Management Plan strategy will be heard in conjunction with updates on the Colorado Wildlife Habitat Program, which that particular piece is the habitat stamp. It's the conservation program that sportsmen and women contribute on each license that we all purchase, on each license that everybody purchases on hunting and fishing to go into the fund for habitat conservation work, whether it's fee title acquisition on a rare occasion, or whether it's connection of calving and fawning grounds or winter ranges or whatever that might be. A lot of it, and I sat on that committee for 8 years and was the chair for 3. And I spoke with the current chair, Brian Webster, and Brian is a great advocate for what we're doing. But it'd be worth watching at around 3:25 if Commissioner Chair Reading can hold the agenda in line. But around 3:25, it'll be a brief update on the RFP process for that entire program and about their recommendations on potential projects and properties. And that's sportsman dollars. And it'd be interesting to see where they come out of executive session and what they actually vote on for the real estate projects in the southeast region of the state. On the 15th, Thursday, there will be a discussion about luring and attracting wildlife. And there's also a bill there again in the legislature about luring bears, not for hunting purposes, but just for trash and human bear conflict type issues that are trying to be addressed. And I think that to stay up above things, there again, we will do a recap on the commission meeting during the next edition of Through the Gates. But these are the type of things, ladies and gentlemen, that they don't sneak up on anybody, but they're just not made aware of for people on the general line of conversation because they don't think that it's happening or they're not really aware that it's being discussed. Andy Holland, he's the big game manager for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. He'll end up creating the final review for the entire chapter, including but not limited to the annual changes and season dates and limited licenses areas, quotas, and the manner of take provisions for bighorn sheep and mountain goats statewide. It's a step one of one process. And then annual changes to season dates, limited license areas, and manner of take provisions for deer, elk, pronghorn, antelope, moose, and bear, and that's also a step one of one. There'll be a discussion about creating the first rifle buck season in D30 and creating a private land-only deer hunt code season in Game Management 682. That's down by the San Luis Valley sand dunes. And also, they'll be modifying the second and third rifle season for bull elk from unlimited over-the-counter to limited in-game management units 54, 55, and 551 over around Gunnison. Now, a lot of these things that I'm talking about here doesn't apply to people that don't really care about the state of Colorado's hunt code restrictions or enhancements or management, but just giving an update about how things are going to play out and what some of the conversations will be. There'll also be a discussion, recommendation about removing antler point restrictions in Game Management Unit 82, modifying hunt codes for the first and fourth rifle seasons in DAU E2, the Elk Unit 2, which is the data analysis unit, not the game management unit. Creating a private land-only hunt code in DAU E13, creating a private land-only archery hunt code in DAU E20 and E35. And when you get into pronghorn, also creating pronghorn licenses in DAU A22 and creating a second antlerless season in DAU Unit A3. Removing hunt code, any sheep hunters, removing hunt code SMS 7901R on the bighorn sheep side of things, and closing hunting and game management unit S35 due to low population size, and then also combining sheep hunt codes and game management units S1 and S18. Now, this is not a normal through the gates to save the hunt episode, but trying to get people to understand how broad these discussions are. And these are only some of the things that will be discussed on the 14th and 15th in preparation for what we'll have to do on a grander, broader scale come the March and May commission meetings. About 9:40, if they could stay on track, Mark Vieira will end up doing a presentation on the annual changes to season dates and harvest limits for mountain lions statewide. It's a step one of one. Also updating the harvest limit groups to implement the East Slope Mountain Lion Management Plan, which will be a damn sure interesting discussing given the tragic occurrences that have happened in the last several weeks about mountain lions on the Front Range and about all the hoopla in the news and so forth. That's supposed to start around 9:40. And if you notice, while that's a big game animal, it's probably one of the most contentious big game animals that you have discussions about. But they saved that for last because they knew that was going to be a longer discussion, even though they've got 20 minutes on the agenda. I would anticipate that was probably going to take a little bit longer than that. But then they also have reorganizing the harvest limit for groups for Lion Management Unit 6001R and 6201R. So that's supposed to be around 9:40. Tune in to the meeting, or if you see this notification or the meeting is already passed and you want to go to the YouTube version, you can supposedly look for that. It's agenda item number 22, supposed to be around 9:40 in the morning on the morning of the 15th. There'll also be considerations for annual changes to waterfowl and migratory bird hunting seasons and related provisions, including season dates, bag limits, and possession limits, and manner of take provisions on the small game migratory bird side of things. That's a step one of two. So they will have the step one in January, the step two in March. And then there will also be this is kind of interesting for anybody that pays attention to this sort of thing, open for the creation of a herpetofauna regulatory chapter, including but not limited to regulations pertaining to licensing, capture, collection, sale, purchase, possession, reporting, disposition, relocation, and transportation of herpetofauna. Well, it's mostly snakes and reptiles. And anybody that has those, anybody that maybe has a pet snake or a pet lizard or a pet turtle needs to pay attention to this, because there will be new regulations created. Excuse me. There'll be new regulations created to take into consider animal welfare and the best management practices, being able to keep those things in captivity or be able to utilize them or transport them or relocate them. And then, the state wildlife area conversation will go for Ralston Creek. One thing that'll probably be of interest to this particular segment of our population will be Bob Inman, agenda item 27 at 11:30. Bob Inman is supposed to do a Wolverine reintroduction plan update, and Bob is the Wolverine, Lynx, and River Otter state coordinator. But it'd be interesting to see how that plays out, because that came off of a Senate bill that was passed, and CPW's been working on this for quite some time, so it's not necessarily a new conversation, but it's been an ongoing conversation. And the thing that I would like to emphasize is the fact that this particular talk about reintroduction of wolverines, in conjunction with the Senate bill that was passed, has been done the right way for reintroduction of a threatened or endangered species, because of the timeline and because of the preparation, because of the stakeholder engagement, because of the thoughtfully minded individuals on the science-based wildlife management side, in conjunction with, and I emphasize, in conjunction with a lot of other factors on the federal and state side of things to introduce wolverines into the state, and not by a ballot initiative and not by voter approval. This is part of the North American model science-based wildlife management side of things, to be able to do things in this manner, like they did with otter and lynx and moose. So this wolverine introduction would actually come on the coattails of successful programs that did not need voter approval, because the scientists were the ones that were controlling the pulse and the actions and the strategies. And that's the way that all of this stuff should break out. As is the case, unless there's an action item, there will be no public comment until the second day at around 1:35. And then there will be a general public comment session for individuals if they want to comment either virtually or otherwise. Now, if you haven't signed up virtually, it's too late. If you're there in person, you'll be able to turn around and do something. But it'd be interesting to see how some of these comments play out, because they have roughly an hour and a half scheduled for comments. And as you're well aware of, I'm sure that there'll be a plethora of individuals professing their expert knowledge, especially on the mountain lion issues, especially on the furbearer issues, and especially on the beaver issues, while they sit behind their computers and provide virtual testimony, or if they showed up to be able to turn around and provide that in person. So, in preparation for the legislative session, which also starts on the 14th, there'll be a plethora of things that are happening on that particular landscape. And I would encourage people to start paying attention. We will have the legislative sportsman's update on the 22nd of January, and there will be invites that go out on social media for people to be able to attend. Last month, we were full. In December, we had a full house. Couldn't take any more people because we didn't have it set up to where we could take hundreds and hundreds. So we had people in the waiting room, and we were a full house. That would be January 22nd. So keep your eyes open for those sort of things that are coming out. And as I said, there'll be a save the date, and then there'll also be an invite that gets on social media and through Instagram and Facebook as well. And then a variety of other things that are happening in conversations that I'm sure the news will cover. And I'm sure that if nothing else, during the commission meeting for the 14th and 15th, the initial part of that meeting will be worth watching for Acting Director Clellan's comments, commission comments. A lot of times, the commission comments seem to be a little bit more frightful, because they Sometimes they've been going off of agenda. And then they want to talk about things that they want to either expedite or get clarification on, or try to work through and maybe get things jumped ahead of other things. So the initial part of the meeting should be, if not educational, at least entertainment, especially since Director Davis isn't there. This will be the first meeting he's not. Since Sportsman Rep Murphy Robinson in there, and they have not filled that position yet. But there will also be updates about the commission appointment process and selection. And from my understanding, Director Clellan, Laura Clellan, is going to provide input on the hiring process for a new director and the stakeholder engagement that goes along with that. So it's something to pay attention to. With the things that have happened over the course of the last 3 weeks, specifically on the mountain lion issue, and I know people probably get tired of listening to mountain lions and mountain lions and mountain lions, but hey, we don't create the news. We just turn around and try to help people dissect and give perspective on the current events and happenings, especially on the wildlife management side. But I want to bring your attention to something that any of you can go and look up. And it's done by the Canadian Wildlife Biology and Management. And it was a original research paper. It's a special issue on mountain lion conservation and management. And it's called Evaluating the Efficacy of Aversive Conditioning of Mountain Lions with Hounds. And it's by Mitchell Parsons and Bart George and Julie Young. Now, Bart George, I'm going to be able to get on a podcast here probably in the next 3 to 4 weeks. But he is a expert houndsman and biologist out of the northern United States, northwestern United States. And I think he works in Canada a lot as well. But this specific document that's worth looking up for anybody that's concerned about mountain lion management and mountain lion interactions and in and around cities and municipalities and human populations. You know, wildlife management takes a variety of different things to be able to accomplish. And I consider, and the science has determined that lethal harvest, I'm going to emphasize, lethal harvest through a well-regulated management plan is necessary on most, if not all, species. Now, my opposition will argue that you don't need to turn around and harvest anything, and they should all be able to live out there in peace and harmony like the Chronicles of Narnia, because wolves are going to live with beavers, and beavers are going to turn around and deal with what they need to with elk or whatever. But we have an opportunity to look outside of the experts within an agency and look at the adversive training that could happen in higher human population areas that maybe where harvest, removal is still there on the table, but harvest, legitimate hunting seasons, becoming more and more restrictive and confined and constrained because of people moving into further wooded and forested areas and on private land. It's not like they're doing it on public land, but the public interface and the connectivity of those private and public lands is starting to push wildlife into a level of human interaction more often. I run a wildlife control business. I can say this. My adversaries don't believe any of this, but nonetheless, when people interact with wildlife, they either have good experiences, they have no experiences because they don't know that it's there, or they have bad experiences. And this particular paper is something that where maybe it could be utilized in some capacity. I think it needs to be further reviewed, and maybe it could be part of a discussion on the East Slope Mountain Lion Management Plan. But the abstract of this is the human-wildlife conflict creates negative outcomes for both people and wildlife by threatening human safety and property and leading to the persecution of wildlife. Conflict with large carnivores results in real and perceived threats to human interest and safety, and thus a range of management tools is necessary to mitigate conflict and facilitate coexistence between humans and carnivores. We investigated hazing with trained hounds as an adversive conditioning tool to affect mountain lion behavior. We conducted repeated human approach trials with GPS-collared mountain lions divided into treatment and control groups, and trials consisted of approaching mountain lions while broadcasting human voices over a speaker and then measuring the flight initiation distance defined as the distance between the approaching researcher and the mountain lion when the mountain lion began to move, and the distance moved by mountain lions in response to that approach. Immediately after the approach trial was completed, we hazed treatment mountain lions through pursuit with trained hounds, while controlled animals received no hazing. The mean of treatment animals increased from 75 to 16 during trial of 1 to 28 plus 12 during trial 4. Now, I'm talking in scientific terms here, so it's not my terms that I'm utilizing. The mean total distance moved doubled from 278 plus 39 meters to 582 plus 68 meters from trials 1 to 4, indicating that pursuit with hounds can alter lion response to a benign stimulus. In contrast, control animals displayed a habituation response, allowing humans to approach closer during subsequent trials. Trial 1 mean 68 plus 16 meters. Trial 4 mean 35 plus 12 meters. However, control animals showed high variability in distance moved with no significant change from trial 1. These results suggest that hazing with trained hounds can be used to displace mountain lions and perhaps increase their sensitivity to human approach. Habituated animals in other carnivore species, such as coyotes, are often more prone to conflict, and thus limiting habituation may help reduce conflict, especially in areas where mountain lions frequently encounter humans, such as wildland-urban interface. Now, I'm not going to read you this entire multi-page document, but for anybody that's concerned about the things that are going on in today's front range environment in Colorado, as you heard me say, there are many tools in the toolbox to mitigating these set of circumstances, including, but not limited to, harvest, including, but not limited to, lethal control. I want you to differentiate between harvest and lethal control. This particular study is something that is not only peer-reviewed, it's also been applied in multiple locations around the western United States, and in certain circumstances might be applicable to be considered in the state of Colorado as an addition to what we currently have for management of our big game predators, and maybe even including bears. There are numerous accounts in the western United States, and I say numerous, I'm not talking about 6 or 12. I'm talking about hundreds of interactions, maybe even thousands, where a lot of this stuff could be utilized in a manner to provide more data, more science, more results, more safety. The efficacy of these programs could actually be employed to better mountain lion populations, train them in areas where you've got that wildland-urban interface to not become as habituated as what they have. Now, I'm going to speak from the wildlife control side of things real quick. People say, I've got foxes coming in my yards and I'm fearful of my dogs and my cats. Well, you can change or alter your immediate habitat in your proximity, such as the food source. Maybe you're feeding birds, maybe you're feeding squirrels, and the foxes are coming in for that. This is a cyclical trickle-down effect when it comes to wildlife. People need to understand that if you live in these areas, you can do something that doesn't relate to that specific animal species, that you're causing an interest or a curiosity for other animal species just by your actions of being able to do what you think you need to do, whether it's birds or whether it's squirrels or whatever it might be. Now, keep in mind, there are laws, rules, and regulations pertaining to feeding wildlife in the state of Colorado, as I mentioned about things that CPW is working with and a piece of legislation that's being introduced about luring bears. Might be unintentionally, but it's having to coordinate and having to commingle the efforts to keep people in line with what wildlife becomes habituated to. Now, I'm not putting the blame on anything for anybody when there's an attack or when there's some sort of tragic event like what happened on New Year's Day up in Glenhaven. What I am saying is that there are multiple things that could be looked at, and there's multiple tools in the toolbox that we ought to be able to take into consideration when we're looking at all of these plans in accordance with what CPW's job is, with what the Department of Agriculture's job is, while considering the management decisions that need to be made on a growing mountain lion, bear, coyote, bobcat, hell, beaver population. Sportsmen and women are all for growing wildlife populations. However, sportsmen and women don't want to be paying for population conflict resolution, especially when it comes into things that we are having to deal with on a larger, grander scale. You look at the amount of wildlife that moves into these cities and into these municipalities, and that's why we have wildlife control operators all through the state to solve these issues. And that's why there's a need for laws, rules, and regulations on a variety of different things, but there's also a need for common sense and practical application and logic and consideration for the facts about you can do this, but there might be a repercussion or a ramification if you do it. There might be some sort of consequences if you do. So go and look up the Canadian Wildlife Biology and Management, evaluating the efficacy of aversive conditioning of mountain lions with hounds. We'll try to include the link into this. We're going to continue to talk about these sort of things. And next week, when I head to the Wild Sheep Show, I'll be interviewing some popular individuals, and I'm going to get their take on some of this stuff. We'll start to make sure that we continue to update about ongoing conversations and the need for engagement through the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. And we'll probably have to do some sort of emergency deal or a social media post in some capacity about things that are coming up at the General Assembly that need sportsman engagement. There might be bills that need to be addressed on a firearm Second Amendment deal. We'll try to keep people updated on that. But Tuesdays for the rest of this year will be the day that Through the Gates to Save the Hunt comes out. So mark your calendars 4 times a month, unless it's an emergency podcast that we need to come up with or an immediate update because of something that changed or something that is happening or something that needs to be addressed. But as we build these conversations, we're going to get the opinions of individuals like Bart George, who was on this aversive study, Jason Matzinger, Jana Waller, Cliff Gray, Randy Newberg, possibly Charles Whitman from Howell, other individuals from back east and down south. We're going to interview Cable Smith with Lone Star Outdoors, Robbie Denning with Rockcast. We've got a great lineup coming up. And we hope that you pay attention to not only what we're talking about on a local level, but what we try to do to expand that reach, because what happens in Colorado happens in other states, not just connected to Colorado, but the Western United States. And they are all under attack in some way, shape, or form. Not just houndsmen, not just trappers, not just bighorn sheep hunters, not just beaver harvesters. So keep apprised of what's going on. Pay attention to what we're doing on social media, Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe, like, share. Let us know your thoughts and feelings. Get on SaveTheHuntColorado.com. Make sure you continue to stay the course. And until next week, when we have an update of this particular meeting, until next week, aim small, miss small. Thanks a bunch.
If you're looking to explore your opportunities to hunt out west, maybe try Colorado. If you're trying to get information about bighorn sheep, elk, deer, private land, public land, maybe it's everything that you want to do as far as pack-in trips. Maybe it's just having a pack trip decided for you, and then when you get there, you just hunt out of a drop camp. Make sure you check out the Colorado Outfitters Association. Colorado Outfitters Association here in the state of Colorado has got a numerous amount of outfitters that are members, and they can supply you with whatever you're looking to try to acquire and what you want to do for the hunt of a lifetime. For more information, check out thecoloradooutfitters.org and make sure that you let them know that you heard about them with Through the Gates, and let them know that you're trying to continue to save the hunt in the state of Colorado. We always talk about supporting businesses that support our efforts to be able to save the hunt in Colorado. Well, the Colorado Shed Company in Penrose, Colorado, just outside Canyon City, is one of those partners. Colorado Shed has been building sheds in the state of Colorado for the last 10 years and is actually owned by sportsmen and women. They support the efforts of what the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management has done, and they also support all the organizations that you're probably a member of. Whether you're looking for small modular type buildings, sheds for your property to store the extra hunting equipment, or maybe just to turn around and put that freezer in for all the meat that you've got, check out Colorado Sheds. They also do pole barns and can do custom manufacturing to whatever your heart desires. She sheds, man caves, it doesn't matter. Check out coloradosheds.com.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Through the Gates. For more content like this, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels.